Okay, hello everyone. We have a very good colleague and friend here giving a talk on the formation of identity in online spheres. Milvi is a PhD candidate, a third-year PhD candidate in the University of Limerick. She will focus on the topic of the anti-vax and vaccine discourse during the COVID pandemic in France.
Thank you, Sina, for the introduction. Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you for attending the talk. So I'm going to talk about identity emergence in France during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's a work together with President Macron, Michael Quayle, and Dong Nguyen. So a few words first about myself. So I studied linguistics and psychology at the University Paris-Cité first, and then I did a master's in cultural and social psychology before switching a bit fields to data science. So now I'm a third-year PhD student in the Science Foundation Ireland Centre for Research Training in Foundations of Data Science, and I am advised by Michael Quayle, Dr. Nguyen, and Taha Yasseri. And yes, just some relevant experience. I worked as a linguist and also I just did an internship in Microsoft. For the study I'm going to talk about here, so it's in France during COVID-19. As the crisis unfolded, opposition to the government policies surged too. Social media became a central platform for criticism and the organization of offline protests. And as Macron's government intensified targeting of non-vaccinated individuals, opposition also further escalated. My research questions here are, is there a collective identity emerging among French people criticizing the vaccine and related policies? How do they see their outgroup? And how entering individuals behave in relation to that group? So a few words about collective identity. It's, I take this definition, the individual's cognitive, moral, and emotional connection with a broader community, category, practice, or institution. It is also a perception of a shared status and relation. It can be imagined or actually experienced. And there is also a sub-category of collective identity called the movement identity. And this is when there is an absence of prior identities or networks. So the identity was born inside the movement and didn't existed before. And this is our focus here. So the movement identity, so as I said, when there is no prior identity, and then there is an important effort by activists to strategically frame identities for better recruitment of new members in that group. What we call a frame is the interpretative packages that activists develop to mobilize potential adherent or constituents. So it's the narrative around the movements. So how do they explain it? How do they, what do they frame as being the main issues and the main problem to be addressed by that social movement? And successful frames are when also there is a clear distinction of between us and them. So the analysis I'm going to present here, so first I'm going to talk about the frame, both in a qualitative way and then through the hashtag use in the community. Then I'm going to talk about how do they differentiate their group and the outgroup through pronoun use and outgroup labels. And finally, I'm going to talk about new members. How do they compare to activists, old members? How do they integrate the group? So about the data set, we collected the data using hashtags. So there were some some studies around that community, gathering that set of hashtags as being the ones that are the most used by people criticizing the vaccine in France. And also by a qualitative search, we added a few of them. So just quickly to say, to show a few, can I have, yes. Okay, so here we have everything like pass sanitaire is the health pass. Then there is mandatory vaccination. Then there are variation of anti-vax. Then there is no to vaccine. I won't get vaccinated. Pass of shame, again, no to the health pass. And this is health dictatorship, stop health dictatorship. And finally, this means we are millions. The time frame, so it's between end of 2020, so December 2020 to January 2022, so a bit more than a year. With that set of hashtags, we collected initially about a bit more than 2 million tweets and retweets, but then we focused on tweets, which gave about 400,000 tweets by almost 39,000 users, unique users. So first, what we noticed looking at those hashtags, because some of them are critical, but some of them are just saying health pass, and also anti-vax was something that was used a lot by people in favor of the vaccine, talking about anti-vax people. So and we want to focus on the people criticizing the vaccine, not everyone. So we created a classifier. So first we manually labeled 1% of the data set, and then used Camembert. It's a variant of BERT, but trained on French data. And so that's just the number used for training, validation, and tests on the data. And so this is the prediction for the class of interest. The class of interest is the tweets that are related to the criticism of the vaccine. So they can be either clearly saying, I won't get vaccinated, I'm against the vaccine, or it can be, I'm against what the government is doing to people, to not vaccinated people. Sorry. And then that classifier was used to label the whole data set, and we excluded all the tweets that were so either in favor of the vaccine or criticizing that debate, like I don't like this polarized society or something like this, and also unrelated tweets, like using those hashtags but actually talking about something completely unrelated. This is just a small overview of the data. I don't know if you can see the color as well, but so we have new and continuing users in so that used to be orange, but it's brown here. So in brown, we have the continuing users. It's the users who have posted at least once before that week. So that's in week. We have from the end of 2020 to the beginning, so the 5th week of 2022. And yeah, so it's what we see. And sorry, and new users are users who posted for the first time on that week. And so we see that the participation is really in waves. There are different events in that time frame, and each time it has as a consequence the more participation of users. But the most important peak is here, as you can see. It's really much more than all the others. It's on the 12th of July when Macron announces mandatory vaccination for health workers and nursing home staff. Sorry if you can see. Yeah, so that's the biggest moment of that community. It's when mandatory vaccination is announced, not for everyone, but it's for the first time announced. Yeah, so that's the main thing. Now so yeah, a quick talk about the qualitative analysis of the tweets we labeled. So only rarely users would say that they're against the vaccine. So that's why we also chose to have a very inclusive frame of people criticizing the vaccine or related policies, because it was very rare to see tweets saying, I won't get vaccinated, I'm against the vaccine. And also, I will discuss this later too, but also criticizing the health like danger of the vaccine. It was really more related to the government policies. And the emphasis was more on the freedom of choice and resistance against the government, dictatorial government, but a government that is trying to impose something on the people. So that was more the way it was framed, rather than I am against the vaccine specifically. So a more political frame. Now I'm going to talk a bit about the hashtags. So they're the most used, but also the ones used for data collection. And what we see, so I'll walk through this figure. So first we see that there is a very rare use of everything related to anti-vax, and I won't get vaccinated. Those are very low. Like those one you see here are the anti-vax hashtags in dark brown, in red, I think, in the Zoom. Yeah, so those are the ones related to anti-vax. So that's not a hashtag that people in that community used to identify with or use to debate about that. And then also all the hashtags related to I won't get vaccinated or no to the vaccine, those are also very rarely used. The exception is here. I will say about it later. So then what we see is the first part of the time frame, there is really a focus on those two hashtags, health dictatorship and stop to the health dictatorship. Then there is here the health pass. So there is another one, but health pass is also what the government uses to implement measures on the vaccine, and people have to get tested before going to different venues. And then there is that also important hashtags. We are millions. That's the hashtag that was exactly the emergence of it was exactly during the week of Macron's speech. And so finally there is this hashtags no to vaccinal path here, to the vaccinal pass, sorry. But this is also, so for once they talk about the vaccine, but it's because the government announces the vaccinal path, and specifically so that people have to get vaccinated this time and not only tested to go to different places. So that's the only time where there is an important hashtag that is directly related to the vaccine. So it's the frame here is really related to the government and its policies. So now I'm going to talk about the second part, about us and them. So the distinction between the in-group and the out-group identity. First, we looked at the use of pronouns. So we gathered different pronouns that you can see here. So first person singular, second person singular, first person plural, third person plural. So for each of this group of pronouns, we have like those different pronouns, the translation here in English. In French, we have more variations than in English for the different pronouns. So we use all the different variations. And what we see is that we have, so I'll also walk through this. So that's here you can see the pronoun use in tweets. So here you have the proportion of tweets that are using the different groups of pronouns here. And this is over the weeks of the time frame. So what we see first is that during the first part of the time frame, there is a focus on the I pronoun, so the first person singular. So the group is using a lot I, my, mine, those kind of pronouns. And this is also here you have the average before Macron's speech and after Macron's speech. So there is like the most used group of pronoun is the first person singular before Macron's speech. And yeah, it jumps down after Macron's speech. And then we have on the second part of the data set a switch to the first person plural pronoun. And this time the most used pronoun after Macron's speech is we, ours, those pronouns. So it seems like there is really a switch from more an individual perspective on the first part of the time frame to a more collective perspective on that issue. And it seems like the triggering event is Macron's speech on the mandatory vaccination. Now we also looked at outgroup words. So we used word2vec to find words that are the most similar to they and them. And then we manually gathered a list of labels that are used to refer to the outgroup. We also checked qualitatively that each of those outgroup labels was actually used to talk about the outgroup. For example, we could have something like conspiracist, but then it wasn't the outgroup. They were actually saying they call us conspiracists. So that's why it was a bit close to they, but it's because that's the way they see us. So that's not an outgroup, it's an in-group word. So we categorize those outgroup words by different categories. So either it can be linked to the authority, so either the government or the police or anything that is like representative of the state, or it could be linked to the people. So the vaccinated people, and then it could be factual or critical. So factual, for example, for the people is just vaccinated people, injected, or like anything related to the action of getting vaccinated. Or it could be critical, so sheeps, COVIDists, like people who are obsessed about COVID, lobotomized, like all those words. And same for authority. So you had like very factual words like elected, governments, parliamentaries, or more critical words about the government. And so finally we have the same about the media. So here you have the use of outgroup words. So the proportion of authors using outgroup words over months here. And what we see is that, so first there is the most used category of outgroup words is words related to the authority. But that makes sense because we said also the frame is really political, so really related to the government. But what we see is that there is a switch. So there is an increased use of words related to vaccinated people. So not the government, but the group of people who are vaccinated over time. And there is a switch here, like again, when after Macron's speech, but there is an increase over time. But here it becomes the second most used category of outgroup words. It's words related to the vaccinated people. So you vaccinated people, like obeyed and just are also like like you are conforming to what the government wants you to do, and this happens, like this kind of speech happens a lot more after Macron's speech too. So it seems like there is more of a societal now distinction between vaccinated and unvaccinated people, while it was more towards the government before. Now we will look a bit closer at how entering users behave and activists. So we will look at, we will focus on the week of Macron's speech. So the 28th week of 2021, it's the 12th of July. Macron announces mandatory vaccination for health workers. And that's also the week where the highest number of users entered the discussion on Twitter and on X, sorry. And we used also Camembert to create sentence embeddings for the tweets. and used cosine similarity to compare the different groups of users. What you see here, sorry, the colors for the people in the room are not really good. But what you see here, so on the left, you see a UMAP representation of authors for the different weeks. So the week of Macron's speech is the 28th. Then you have the week before in green and the week after in orange. And what we see, so as just a first look here, is that it seems like, so before Macron's speech on the 27th, all the users are located here. So that's sentence embeddings and UMAP reduction. And then on the week of the 28th, week of Macron's speech, there are a lot of new users entering the conversation. And then the week after Macron's speech, it seems like there's still some of the users who are close to the ones entering Macron's speech, but most of the users gathered back to the way it was before Macron's speech. And that's also what we see here with the numbers. So that's the similarity among users. So that's within each group. We have users before Macron's speech and after Macron's speech being more similar. So this is not a significant difference, but they are both significantly different than the week of Macron's speech. So a lot of new users enter the conversation and they don't really know what to talk, like how to talk about that conversation. So that's a way to explain why they're more dissimilar when they enter the conversation. But then what we see is that the week just after Macron's speech, it seems like they go back to being more similar to each other. And that's here you see the comparison between groups. So what we see is that the week 27, so before Macron's speech compared to the week 29, is more similar than those weeks compared to the week 28. I don't know if that's clear, but so the authors are more similar before and after Macron's speech than they are similar to authors entering the conversation on the week of Macron's speech. Then we divided users into 4 groups. First, users who had posted before Macron's speech, either activists, and what we call activists is the 10% of users who post the most and at least in 10 different months. So they post a lot and consistently during that time frame. And then we have other users, users who had tweeted before Macron's speech, but not as regularly and often than activists. And then we have 2 other groups of users who entered the week of Macron's speech and stopped right after, and users who started the week of Macron's speech but continued. So we interpret this as users who just wanted to react to that event of mandatory vaccination, and users who actually want to join the conversation, that community. What we see here, so I'm also going to walk through those heat maps. So here you have the average cosine similarity between different groups of users. So here you have the week before Macron's speech, we have only those 2 groups of users who had posted before Macron's speech. Then on the week of the Macron speech, we have all users. So those also who entered but continued, entered and stopped. And the week after Macron's speech, we have only those who continued, not the ones who stopped. And here you have so the diagonal, that part is the same as that one. You have on the diagonal, you have the within similarity of the groups. And here you have the similarity between each group and the other group. So here, for example, the other users who had posted before Macron's speech, similarity with activists. So what we see first is that activists is the group that is the most similar to each other. So it seems like they have one consistent way of, so at least they use more similar, like that's the very basic understanding is that they use more similar words, more similar way of talking than other groups. A more social sciencey perspective would be that yeah, they're activists, they're like the core of that community. So they agreed more on something like on a clear narrative to be used in that community. And also what we see is that as new users enter the conversation, they also become more similar to each other. It seems like it's exactly the same users in those 3 weeks. So, but they're becoming more similar over these weeks. Then what we see is that the users who entered the conversation on the week of Macron's speech and continued after, they're more similar. So initially, they're already more similar to activists than the user who stopped are to activists. But they are less similar to activists than other users, so the ones who had posted before Macron's speech. But that changes the week after Macron's speech, is that there seems to be a switch to users continuing posting that became more similar to the activists than the other users who were posting already before Macron's speech. So it seems like they entered the conversation, they already are a bit more motivated than users who just entered and stopped, but they learned a bit more the language of the community posting the week after Macron's speech. Then what we see is, so looking at the diagonal, we see that as expected, so activists are the group that is the most consistent with each other. Then on the week of Macron's speech, we have other users, so the one who were posting before. Then we have users who entered and continued. And then lastly, we have users who entered the conversation but stopped. These are the groups that is the less similar to each other. So they just enter and they just talk using those hashtags, but they don't really want to conform to the language of that community. And then there is, again, a switch to users who continued the conversation being more similar to each other than the rest of the users. About pronoun use, we see that, so that's what I had showed you before, but that's activists and other users. Then we have users who continued the conversation. So what we see here is that it seems like they start, so we have the we pronoun, so first person plural, that is the most used. So this starts on the week of Macron's speech because they haven't tweeted before. And what we see here is that it seems like compared to that, the other groups where there is like a sudden decrease after Macron's speech of the use of the we pronouns. For users who continued, it seems like it stays more stable, at least for a few weeks. But then we also see for users who stopped that they also used more the we pronouns on the week of Macron's speech. And that can also be explained by that peak of the hashtag We Are Millions. That was the main hashtag used on that week. And because they stopped after, we don't know how they continued. About outgroup words, what we see is that so activists were the ones that were using the most outgroup words. Then we had others who were posting, like before Macron's speech, it was only those two groups. But then what we see during the week of Macron's speech is that authors who just started but stopped, they're the ones using the least outgroup words. Then we have so other users. Then we have other authors who started and continued after Macron's speech. And then we have a switch after Macron's speech that these users who started on July 12th and continued, they're becoming like even more like active, like they're talking even more about the outgroup word, the outgroup people are the authority than activist people. So Yes, that's it for me. To conclude, what we see in that analysis is that there seems to be an emergence of a collective identity on the week of Macron's speech. We saw it through the use of we pronouns and the outgroup words being more focused on the outgroup people rather than authority. Then we saw how entering users adapt their language to the community and specifically to activists through pronouns and outgroup words. And also we saw how there might be something like overconfirmism of users who entered the conversation and continued after. Overconfirmism is when they conform even more than the activist of that group. So they're even better members of that group than the initial members there. And that's also a phenomenon that can happen when people just enter the conversation and they need to like show that they are good members of that community. They might do even more to be accepted by the community as real members of that group. Yeah, that's it. And there will be a preprint soon available. So if you want to follow for updates, you can also find me on LinkedIn.